Revolver News has done it again. Working with Republican Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, they were able to obtain video from when the DNC pipe bomb was found on January 6th. It won't surprise you to know that the feds fought Massie every step of the way on this. Weird, right? They have no problem selectively releasing pictures of MAGA grandmas to arrest, but the supposed pipe bomber gets a free pass. The only video we have of that suspect is of poor quality and is missing important frames from it, almost as if they don't want the guy to be identified all these years later. That makes a whole lot more sense when you see the new context. So what Darren Beatty of Revolver News is reporting is that at around 1:05 p.m. on January 6th, as we can now see in the video, a man wearing a backpack approaches a Metro PD SUV and a black Secret Service SUV to presumably alert them to the presence of the pipe bomb he found sitting in full view of everyone, especially in full view of the DNC security guard station just a few feet away. But instead of them immediately jumping out of their vehicles, setting a perimeter and making calls for VP Kamala Harris inside the DNC building to be whisked away to safety, they wait an extra minute or two from after the backpack guy leaves to finally get out of their units. And for what it's worth, the backpack guy is reportedly a plainclothes Capitol Police officer, an important detail I'll get back to later. So when they finally get out of their units, you can see children walking by just a few feet away from a supposed live pipe bomb, and yet authorities never yell at them to get back. In fact, the officers themselves all stand around the bomb very closely. They have another officer come over and take a quick picture of it. He gives them a thumbs up, and then they start making calls for the bomb squad to send in a robot to defuse it. It's all very strange, right? Revolver News, in its write-up about this, explains, quote, "To compound the strangeness of it all, recall that Kamala Harris covered up her presence at the DNC building on January 6 for almost a year. For nearly a year, Kamala led the media to believe that she was in the Capitol during the so-called siege. Even the Department of Justice took this false understanding for granted and mentioned Kamala's alleged presence and evacuation from the Capitol during the siege to add a sense of gravitas to several of its indictments. It turns out Kamala was not at the Capitol as it was being evacuated on the 6th, but rather at the DNC building, while the allegedly live pipe bomb was still right outside. Why on earth would Kamala Harris keep her presence in the DNC building a secret? It would seem like the story of the first woman of color vice president-elect in history coming within feet of the deadly pipe bombs of the January 6th insurrection would be a headline that both Kamala and the regime media would be interested in milking for all it's worth. How strange is it, come to think of it, that in Joe Biden's big January 6th anniversary speech, he neglects to mention that his own vice president narrowly lost her life to a MAGA pipe bomb. Could Kamala have covered up her presence at the DNC in order to keep attention away from the fact that the Secret Service was at the DNC building and thus keep the public in the dark about the fact that the Secret Service missed the pipe bombs in their sweep and reacted with suspicious nonchalance when ultimately informed of the bomb? Or is there a still more sinister explanation for this otherwise inexplicable cover-up, end quote. The article goes on to explain how strange it is that the pipe bomb sat outside the DNC for 17 hours without being spotted, despite high foot traffic in the area as per security cameras. It's not like the bomb was hidden inside the bushes, it was literally sitting out in the open next to a bench. The DNC security guards missed it. The Secret Service missed it during their search of the perimeter for Kamala's arrival. Somehow their search dogs couldn't sniff it out, but an alleged plainclothes Capitol Police officer found it within minutes of the RNC pipe bomb also being found. That one was found 16 hours after it was planted in an alleyway behind the RNC building by a woman who works for a company called Pendulum. Revolver explains that Pendulum is a company staffed with DoD, DARPA, and CIA alums and does business with the government to combat misinformation online. Pendulum has so far released reports on election fraud, COVID vaccine misinformation, and of course, QAnon domestic extremism. Again, it's all very strange, right? I know they say it's a small world, but wow, that's a really small world. This next detail will make that even more apparent because not only did both bombs sit out in the open, hardly concealed for 16 to 17 hours each, they were only equipped with a 1-hour kitchen timer. Once again, looking to Revolver, they explain, quote, "The fact that the pipe bombs were equipped with mechanical 1-hour timers with no remote detonation capability has significant implications, considering they were planted on the evening of January 5th. It is hard to see what the pipe bomber would have gotten out of planting bombs at around 8 p.m. that were set to go off in an hour at 9 p.m. This would have simply meant a little explosion in a back alley in the quiet hours of the evening. In order to have the desired diversionary effect, the bombs would either have to go off close to the attack on the Capitol or be discovered at a time that was fairly closely synchronized to the attack on the Capitol at 12:53 p.m. If either the DNC or RNC pipe bombs were discovered too early or too late, it could ruin the diversion effect. For instance, if the DNC bomb were discovered earlier on the morning of the 6th, that could have the effect of heightening security around the Capitol rather than diverting resources from it. Similarly, if the bombs were discovered too late after the attack on the Capitol, there would be no diversionary effect. We repeat, in order for the pipe bombs to have a diversionary effect, they'd have to be discovered at a time that was fairly closely synchronized with the attack on the Capitol. But how could the pipe bomber have counted on random individuals or even law enforcement discovering the bombs within that narrow time frame? End quote. I guess the feds want us to believe that this supposed pipe bomber is just the luckiest guy in the world, that his bombs were found right as the barricades around the Capitol were being moved and hidden from unsuspecting Trump supporters walking over by a few strange guys, apparently led by someone whom I can't mention all too much now for legal reasons, but I think we all know who I mean based on his recent J6 sweetheart deal. And also, for what it's worth, my former colleague Jack Posobiec is pointing out that these supposed pipe bombs look eerily similar to the ones the FBI uses for training.